This conference will now be recorded.
All right, we'll call July 16th, 2024 zoning board meeting order at 6 o'clock. My first question is, how many people here are here for the 100 Autumn Drive case? Pretty much everybody in the room. If the board's good with it and Mr. Bedard's good with it, are you guys on board with swapping the case order just in the interest of everybody's time?
Sure.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Bedard?
Sure.
Yeah.
If you like, yeah.
And is the applicant for that case also okay with that? That's you guys? You're good with that? Okay. Okay, so then in that case, we will start with case 24-10.
So I will have to recuse myself.
Okay. Steve's going to recuse himself from this. I believe, correct me, he's got to leave. Yeah, you got to say it. Awesome.
Good to proceed?
Yes, good to go.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to hear from us. My name is Megan Carrier. I work at Sheehan, Finney, Bass & Green, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Sobriety Centers of New Hampshire. With me tonight is Sobriety Centers CEO, Felicia Orchard. We also have John Flanagan, who's Vice President of Development for Summit Behavioral Healthcare. Just for the board's knowledge, Summit is Sobriety Centers' parent company and the owner of the property. They have extensive experience with respect to substance use treatment, and they have had significant success at the other facilities they're involved with. They have 36 other facilities. So hopefully between the three of us, we can answer any questions that the board has. As the board knows, we're here tonight seeking approval in relation to the adult care facility. The town has also referred to it as an adult recovery center. I think now it's technically classified as a residential care facility located at 100 Autumn Drive. The property has been used as an adult care facility for some time now. That use was initially approved in 2017. However, in 2021, modifications to the town's zoning ordinance rendered it a lawful non-conforming use. Specifically in 2021, the town eliminated adult care facility, which was a defined use and was permitted in the RA district, replaced it with a use called residential care facility, and prohibited residential care facilities in the RA district. So we are here tonight because the applicant proposes to make several, we think, minimal modifications to the manner in which the facility is operated, and the planning board felt that those modifications triggered zoning review. To be clear, though, we don't intend to deviate from the residential level of care that is what's been going on at the facility to date. To orient us, I'll give a brief background on the history of the use and the applicant's proposed modifications. So again, in 2017, the planning board granted site plan approval for a 9-bed adult care facility that was intended to provide services to individuals suffering from substance use disorder. In 2021, the planning board approved a modification of that 2017 approval, which allowed for expansion of the use to 30 beds. The 2021 approval was subject to a number of conditions, one of which was a connection to the Tilton sewer system. That connection has not yet been made. The applicant is working towards making it, but for now, we are still at the 9 beds. The applicant proposes to continue utilizing the property to serve the needs of individuals suffering from substance use disorder, primarily veterans and first responders. As the board may be aware, there is currently a big push to provide support for our veterans in this particular context. They have been identified as particularly high risk for substance use disorder. As I mentioned, the applicant does propose 2 changes in how the facility is operated. The changes relate to the goings-on inside the structure, so the care and services provided to the individuals served. But importantly, we don't anticipate that they will represent any change to the intensity of the use or the impact that the use has on the surrounding area. Specifically, the applicant proposes, first, to increase the number of staff persons on site very slightly, and second, to employ medical personnel who will work with the individuals served. I'll provide more details as to both of those changes, but there is one preliminary issue that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, and which you might have gleaned from our application materials, and that is whether our proposal constitutes an expansion of the existing non-conforming use, which would be governed by section 9.3 of the ordinance, or whether it constitutes a change from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use, which would be governed by section 9.2 of the ordinance. We did include both requests in our application materials just to be safe, but I thought it might be most efficient for me to pause after providing the board with some more details on what we're proposing to do, at which point maybe the board could have a discussion and decide which section they think we're under. I'm happy to discuss both, but I want to be cognizant of your time and the fact that we have another application behind us. So if the board wanted to decide one or the other, I can just limit my presentation to that section.
My knee-jerk feeling is I don't feel like I know enough to make a stance there. I don't know how you guys feel. But whether we want to consider this as an expansion of an existing use or a change of use, I don't have my head around.
And I can give more information on the proposal first before you actually make that decision.
Probably. Let's go a little further before we worry about
Okay,
that.
great. All right, so I'm going to just give a little details on each of the two proposed changes that I mentioned, starting with the staffing change. So while neither of the existing approvals were conditioned, there wasn't a condition of approval that said, you can only have so many staff. But the applicant in 2017 did make a number of representations about staffing, most notably that there would never be more than 12 people at the facility, so 9 beds and 3 staff. While operating under the 9-bed approval, the applicant's staffing proposal would increase that number by 2, so 5 staff, 14 people total. There would not be 14 people at the facility all the time, only under circumstances where all 9 beds are full and a floating staff member is on site. The staff include a nurse, a tech, a counselor, a cook, and one of those floating staff members. The additional staff, we believe, represent an improvement not only for the individuals served, who will receive a higher quality level of care, but also for the residents of the surrounding area, to the extent that additional staff will enable the applicant to more continuously and effectively monitor the individuals served. And if there are any questions about that, Felicia can give some more information. They have a system they use with an iPad where they're checking every certain number of minutes, checking in on each individual that's being served. So it really provides that extra person, allows them to really monitor the people that are there. The initial limitation to 12 individuals appears to have been based on concerns relating to septic capacity at the site. And there are actually no septic concerns associated with an increase to 14 people. The current septic system, which was installed after that initial 2017 approval, is capable of accommodating 1,345 gallons per day. Per state regulations, this facility requires a septic capacity of 135 gallons per day per bed, plus 20 gallons per day per employee. So for 9 beds with 5 employees, we would need septic capacity of 1,315 gallons per day. So we have the 1,345. It accommodates our proposal with a little extra wiggle room. The request for increased staffing is less relevant to the extent the applicant is ultimately able to achieve that sewer connection to expand to the 30 beds in accordance with the 2021 approval. The planning board minutes from that approval don't reflect any limitation on the number of staff, likely because with that sewer connection, we weren't dealing with that same septic capacity concern. The town also determined in 2020 that there is sufficient parking on site to accommodate that expanded use. This will remain true in relation to the applicant's use of the property. There are 28 spaces at the property, including 4 handicap accessible spaces. The individuals served will not be permitted to have vehicles on site, so we really just need parking for staff and for visitors, which are very limited. All right, so that is the staffing change. So unless there are questions about sort of the facts surrounding that change, I can move on to the medical personnel change. So
just for clarification for me,
Sure.
Is this application looking for an increase of staffing regardless of the connection to the sewer system? Is that,
Yes.
understanding that correctly?
Yeah, because for the 9 beds, we'd be going, which isn't related to the sewer system. For the 9 beds, we're requesting to go from 12 maximum to 14 maximum.
Okay, so that's almost a separate piece of it. You want to do that regardless of the 30 beds piece of
Yes.
it? Okay,
Yep.
Just making sure I understand.
Yes. Any other questions on the staffing change? No? Okay. So turning to the employment of medical personnel, similarly, neither the 2017 nor the 2021 approval specifically prohibited, there was no condition prohibiting employment of medical personnel or prohibiting medication from being prescribed by staff on site. But the initial applicant did represent to the board that no medical treatment or therapy would be provided on site and that medication would be prescribed off-site and administered on-site by unlicensed medical assistants. The minutes from the 2017 approval do also reflect that licensed drug and alcohol counselors would be available to provide services to the individuals. So just to be clear, under the prior approvals, medication is administered on site, it's just prescribed off-site. So it's administered on site and counseling is provided. The only change that we're proposing relates to who is prescribing and administering that medication and working with the individuals served. The applicant proposes to employ a medical director to provide oversight nurse practitioners who will monitor care, including by prescribing medications, and other licensed nursing staff who will administer the medications. This change is not something that will be visible from outside of the building. Again, this is all related to the interior workings of the facility. Again, we're talking about serving the veteran population, which is part of the basis for this change. We note that the VA specifically encourages and prefers facilities that employ medical professionals. And the reason for that, and the reason the applicant is proposing this modification, is that it allows for a higher level of care. So each individual served will have a customized plan of care that can be more quickly and efficiently adjusted as the individuals proceed through the program. So to be clear, while medications will be prescribed and administered at the facility, the individuals served will not be at a hospital. We're not talking about a higher level of care. They're not at a hospital level care. They're not at an inpatient psych level of care. We're still talking about this residential level of care. So they are required to be more stable. We're not talking about people that are in need of that higher level of care. And I just wanted to be clear about that. I know when medications are prescribed on site, there becomes a concern that we're talking about people who have who are less stable, and that's not the situation. I'm sure Felicia can also provide more information on that if the board has questions. So that's the background on the medical personnel change. So at this point, unless the board has questions on sort of the facts, I was thinking we could return to that preliminary question about whether the board views these modifications as an expansion of the existing use versus a change from one non-conforming use to another. To the extent it helps the board, we did do some research on how facilities offering this residential level of care are classified in other New Hampshire municipalities by doing lots of calls to local town offices. So we found the Live Free Recovery Services in Keene. They have 4 facilities. 2 are classified as large group home. 2 are classified as residential drug or alcohol treatment facilities. Green Mountain Treatment Center in Effingham is a substance abuse treatment center. Farnham Center in Manchester is classified under nursing homes, rehabilitation and convalescent center, providing 24-hour nursing care. And New Hampshire Detox in Bethlehem is classified as a treatment facility. So I think because, again, we're talking about this residential level of care as opposed to a hospital level of care or an inpatient psych level of care, these facilities are not typically classified as hospitals or medical clinics. We do think that we still fit within the residential care facility definition, but of course, we're happy to address whichever section of the ordinance the board finds that we fall under.
Thank you. Any initial thoughts?
I think it really is 2 separate issues. And one goes to an expansion of use, I think, and the other one is an expansion of existing services. This is now a pre-existing non-conforming use. So I think rightfully they do fall before us on either instance or both.
Jim, can you talk into the mic, please?
Oh, sorry. So I think they do fall into both categories, and we may have to consider both.
Okay. You think that they fall into both a change of use and an expansion of existing uses?
And both are from a pre-existing non-conforming use,
right?
Which is rightfully comes before us.
I'm thinking both.
I am
Change,
too.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if at some point we might want to have some council advice on this. Also, although other communities may have different ways of classifying these kinds of establishments, our zoning laws have been set up by the residents of Tilton. And I think that's what we have to be conscious of and make sure that we enforce.
Yeah, sure. If at any point we realize that we want to get some clarification, we can absolutely pause this, provide our questions to legal counsel, and then go from there for sure. I'm a little bit on it's an expansion of existing use as far as trying to bracket into one, but I'm the lone one there. So let's continue as both, and it's a little more work, but at least we've covered our bases that way.
Sure. And just so I understand, I might have misheard. So is it the increase in staff is the expansion and the medical personnel is the change? Or I just want to make sure that understanding correctly.
That's a fair question. Let's get some
Wouldn't the
clarification.
expansion be of the beds?
We're not
That-
trying to expand beds right now, just to be clear. We're under the previous approvals. We're just talking about increasing staff and hiring some medical professionals.
So for clarification, they can go to 30 beds.
Yes.
Regardless of
Right.
tonight. That's not
Yes.
something that
That's not what we're here
hearing.
for.
Okay.
We're hearing tonight whether to add 2 staff members, and then also whether or not, and please correct me if I'm boxing this in too small, changing from a facility where medications are prescribed off-site and then given on-site to a facility where a medical provider can prescribe medications on-site.
That is 100% correct. Thank you.
I see it as an expansion of an existing use.
Yep.
I don't see it as a change of use.
Yes.
So I can't answer her question.
So they're trying to expand the amount of staff
Correct. And the services
and
that
the
those staff.
services the staff is going to provide.
And I think if I understand this correctly, part of that increase in staff is that they have not done the sewer connection. So there are going to be above and beyond the septic system potentially.
I believe she just addressed that they are not above.
They
and
are
beyond.
not.
Right. We're not above the septic
correct.
system.
Correct.
Okay. But the previous approval was for lesser staffing.
Correct.
Correct.
That,
That's why we're here tonight for
Right.
the more staffing piece.
Yes.
For more staffing. If they want to expand the beds, then they have to tie into the sewer.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm going to redirect the question back to you guys because I can't really answer it.
Well,
Which piece are we seeing as an expansion and which piece are we seeing as a change of use?
I'd like to deal with each one of them separately.
Okay, I understand that you deal with each piece of it separately,
Yep.
but what bracket are we going to put number 1 under? So where are we going to put the increasing of staff from 12 or the total number of people on site from 12 to 14? Are we putting that under an expansion of an existing use, or are we putting that under a change of use?
in my opinion, that falls under expansion of
Yes.
existing use.
I would
That's
say
how I would see
expansion.
You agree with that?
I'll go along
All
with
right.
that.
So we're all on board that number 1 is an expansion of existing use. And then number 2, how are we going to see moving an on-site medical director, which would allow for prescription of medications on-site versus a prescription of medication off-site? Do we see that as a change of use or an expansion of the existing use?
I would say a change.
See that as a change of use?
I agree.
Change of use? Okay. So does that help?
That
Help
does
you go
help.
forward?
Yep, it sure does. Okay. All right, so I'm going to address the increase in staff under section 9.3, and I'm going to address the hiring of medical personnel under section 9.2.
That's good.
Okay. All right. So starting with the staffing change under section 9.3, section 9.3 of the ordinance provides, quote, a non-conforming use may be expanded only with the permission of the zoning board of adjustment and only within the limits of the lot on which it existed at the time of passage of the portion of the zoning ordinance which caused it to become non-conforming, end quote. So the increase to staffing is appropriate under this provision. Specifically, the applicant's request to increase the number of staff complies with the requirement that the expansion be contained within the limits of the lot as it existed at the time that it became non-conforming. We're not talking about expanding to some other land area. We're not talking, we're actually talking about staying confined within the existing building. We're not expanding the building. The staff increase is a modest increase over what was permitted via the 2017 approval. Again, we're talking 2 additional employees, and there are no concerns regarding septic. So we don't see this as resulting in any significant change to the intensity of the use, that 2 additional members of staff. So that's staffing under. So then I'm going to turn to the medical employees under section 9.2. Section 9.2 is a little lengthy, but I'm going to read it just so that we're all on the
But
same page.
just in the interest of keeping things clean, would you guys like to deal with the first piece of it and kind of come to a consensus and a stance before we go to the second piece of it, so that we can kind of keep the ducks in a row?
I think it could get confusing.
Okay, yeah.
What do you think, Chuck?
Well, I guess you would also be wanting public input on the first one as well.
Yes, but
you
if
wanted-
we don't want to do that, then we won't go that route. If we want to just take it all as one big chunk, I'm
If we're
just
going to
trying to,
separate the issues, I would be more comfortable in dealing with this one first and then moving on to the second one.
so are you on board with that?
I am on board with that. I do have one other preliminary question. Sorry, I'm
No,
full
that's
of
okay.
preliminary questions. So when I read actually both section 9.2 and 9.3, neither of them mention special exception. They just have their own criteria that the board needs to consider. And I sort of contrast that with, other sections in the ordinance, like the one that I had written down here was 8.4, which provides, quote, by special exception, as the Board of Adjustment shall rule, and then goes on talking about when you can have a manufactured housing unit. So I wasn't sure. I don't think that we're in special exception land right now, just because neither of these provisions provide specifically that this is a special exception. By my read, I think the board just needs to go by whatever the criteria are in 9.2 and 9.3. But we did submit special exception applications just to be safe. I wasn't sure how the board was going to interpret the provisions and wanted to be sure that if the board does view this as a special exception situation, that we submitted the correct applications and then went over the criteria. So if the board does view these as requiring a special exception, I'm happy to go over the special exception criteria.
Pass. So we've never done anything other than special exceptions or variances. So this ends up in our kind of our legal counsel wheelhouse.
I'm happy to go over the criteria, so I've done it. And then if you want to consult with legal counsel, at least I've made the presentation and you have the information you need. Or if you want to consult with legal counsel and we can do it later, whatever you prefer.
Well, let me digest this for a hot second.
Of course.
Anyone else's input here? This is the criteria not using special counsel, Pat, if I'm right, would just be whatever is written in the ordinance.
Correct.
And we would just judge based on what's written in the ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
You guys agree with that assessment?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't want to take up a bunch of time
Mhm.
if that's not the route we have to go.
Mhm.
How does the board feel?
I don't think we have to go as a special exception.
That's how I feel personally.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what he's.
I don't think we don't have to proceed with a special exception. But whatever you guys.
Yeah, I don't know that it falls under special exception either.
That's not how I interpret it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we're all on board.
Great.
Yeah. And we can continue under the we're on 9.2.
We're on
correct?
9.3. 9.3. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the board wants to pause here, ask us some questions about 9.3 and the staffing increase, and keep that separate from the medical professionals question.
I don't have any questions. It's pretty well spelled out what they're looking to do.
Okay.
Yeah, you're looking to add staffing.
You're looking to add
Regardless
medical-
to all of this, you're looking to add two more
two
people.
more people, medical director, and
Yeah.
Does the two people include the medical director? Is that part of? Yeah, you can speak. Yep. For sure.
Hi, my name is Felicia Orchard, CEO for Sobriety Centers of New Hampshire. So the additional staff that we're looking to add includes a floating staff. The medical director that we currently employ oversees both of our facilities and would add this facility in. The nurse practitioner is someone who would be there on a daily basis, but not for a full day at a time. So the rotating employee would be between myself, the medical director, the nurse practitioner, a clinical director, other leadership staff that don't spend their time in any one location. So the staff that would be there on a daily basis include a tech, a nurse, a cook, and a counselor.
Okay, so you have 4 people for a day shift, and then how many overnight?
2 overnight. So a nurse and a tech overnight. Okay. We never have a staff member in the building by themselves. We always have 2 people there together. And yeah, that's it for staffing. Do you have other questions for me regarding that?
I don't. No questions.
While we have Felicia up here, if you had questions about the monitoring process that they use, which was part of the reason they wanted to have an additional staff person, she could definitely give some details on that as well.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand
Sure.
at all.
So being a part of Summit has afforded us an opportunity to improve a lot of the platforms that we use to provide care to our clients. One of those platforms is something called Observe Smart. Observe Smart is a beacon system that uses Bluetooth. I'm not a technical person, so there's like some RFI chip in it. But the clients wear a bracelet on their wrist or on their ankle. It has a beacon in it. And then our staff members have an iPad that pairs with the beacon. And so part of being licensed in the state of New Hampshire, one of the regulations is that residential clients need to be rounded on every 60 minutes. We have to provide documentation that shows that we laid eyes on them every 60 minutes. This platform, when I'm close to someone else with my iPad, it picks up on their beacon. And I can see on the other end as myself with the analytics how close the staff member was to the client or how far away from them they were. I can see in real time when they did the observation. They have to acknowledge where the client was, if they were awake, sleeping, eating, aggravated, what that looked like. And then if the client is too far away, then we won't be able to pick them up with our tablet. So it takes our monitoring to kind of the next level, right? It takes the human error part out of it. Staff aren't able to just sign off and say that they saw a client. I have digital records that shows exactly how far away from someone they were when they picked up on that client and whether they were late on their rounds or they were rounding early or what that looks like. And so that's what the tech's job is. That's one of their jobs. And the nurse also helps with that as well.
So is that something you are implementing now or just starting?
We already do that.
You
So
do.
we have another residential facility in Antrim, and we use that at our residential facility in Antrim. We also have detox there, and detox clients are rounded on every 30 minutes. The platform has the capability to change the frequency and what time rounds are doing. So if I have a client who's really struggling, I can increase their frequency. If we never go above 60 minutes, that's the regulation for the state, but I can change it and tailor it to each client. And we can also put alerts on so that staff can look at it and see if someone's struggling with something. There can be a little flag on their name. It has the picture of the client, so there's never any question if you're rounding on the right client or not. Their picture is on your iPad, and then you're connecting to their Bluetooth beacon, and you're able to pick it up.
Thank you.
Any questions to that comment?
Not quite
Not
yet.
yet.
If you can just remember it, we'll get
Remember
there for sure.
That was a lot of information.
I'd be happy to share more after.
And this is all new technology that you have installed recently.
Correct. So Sobriety Centers of New Hampshire was acquired by Summit on March 1st. Since that time, we've been able to expand a lot of the platforms and programs we're utilizing to provide a higher level, a higher quality of care for our clients and really increase what we're able to provide to the residents of New Hampshire.
Yeah, please.
Is there some form of requirement or mandate that has changed that would require this additional staffing, an insurance reimbursement scheme, something along those lines? Because then it may fall into a hardship situation as far as what my thinking would be concerned.
Sure. So can I share? Yeah. So essentially we're looking for this change. Previously, before Sobriety Centers of New Hampshire in 2017, the facility was a private pay facility. Didn't accept insurance. I did not work there at the time, so forgive me if I misspeak, but it did not accept insurance. It was cash only or private pay. Currently, it was used as recovery housing. We are looking to license it as a residential facility, which means that it would be available to individuals who had insurance, and it would also fall under the regulations of the state of New Hampshire. So to be able to become licensed, that's why we're seeking the increase in staff and also why we're seeking the medical personnel. To be able to be licensed, we have to have those medical personnel and we have to have a minimum number of staff, and the 3 staff above the 9 beds is not sufficient to be able to fulfill those needs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions for her on this before we
Not
move it
right
to
now.
public comment?
Yes, I'm ready for public comment.
You guys good at the moment? So we're gonna move to
Good.
public comment on item number 1 on this, if anybody would like to speak to it, which is the increase in staffing from 12 to, well, total number of people from 12 to 14.
My name is Doug Wade, 5 Westwood Drive, Tilton, New Hampshire. First of all, I heard you mention that you're a veteran. You work with veterans?
I think you got to direct the questions up this way.
Okay, I heard that
interest of formality.
Okay, that the facility is for veterans?
Yes.
My understanding is they're targeting veterans and first responders. I don't know whether that's solely veterans or first responders.
Yeah, we're looking to primarily serve veterans and first responders, but we're not going to not allow other people in if they're looking for services.
So right now they are not honoring veterans, is that what they're saying?
He's correct? You are working with veterans and first responders currently.
Yes.
Okay. Another question I have is your medical assistant that you talked about. Is this medical assistant, are they licensed in the state of New Hampshire?
Yes. All right.
All of the medical staff that we would be employing would have a license in the state of New Hampshire, whether it was the medical director, a nurse practitioner, or a registered nurse.
An RN or an MD?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Your residential care that you take care of, will these people be able to walk if they want to leave the facility? Will they be able to leave the facility at any time and walk the neighborhood?
I can just answer.
Yeah.
Okay. So
But just trying to avoid the tit for tat that can sometimes
Yeah.
happen. Not that anybody's here is going to do that. Just
yeah, absolutely. So we're not a locked facility, but clients are not permitted to go on walks by themselves, if that makes sense. So if a client we take clients at our other facility for walks supervised by staff. It's typically, when it's really nice out, they go for a walk during the day. This property is much larger, so we wouldn't necessarily need to be going anywhere else. But clients are there of their own free will as well. It's not a locked facility.
Okay. At this state now that they're in now and wherever they're doing now, they're allowing their people to walk free around the neighborhood, if I'm not correct. Is that true?
You are correct, because we are not currently operating a residential facility, so there would be a higher level of oversight with what we're proposing to do.
Okay. Right now they are walking through the neighborhood. They're walking through backyards. So I just want to make you aware of that, as we are probably all aware of what's going on right now. And I am figuring that to the board that if they're not controlling it now, I understand they want the GPS to go, and that's a great thing. But if they allow this person to walk free, all they're seeing on their screen is Bobby Joe walking down Autumn Drive, and he takes a right on Lancaster. That's what they're seeing right now, depending on how far the electronics follow his collar or tag, whatever he's got on him. Is that correct?
it doesn't sound to me like they're like GPS tracking the patients that are in the facility, but it sounds like what they're trying to do is increase the level of care that's available to help with that oversight and dial some of that stuff back, is my understanding.
You're correct.
That's right. So we absolutely appreciate that concern, and thank you for sharing it with us. And part of what we're trying to do here is again, pull some of that back and fix some of those problems. But thank you for bringing that to our attention.
It is a big problem. Please let them know that, because we're seeing them walking through our yards now.
Yeah, thank you.
And they're not identifying themselves. They're just saying they're in that clinic down the street. And they're not answering any questions, and they're not veterans. So I just want to be aware of what's going on here as a neighbor. When you say off-site, you're not allowing people, you say you have an off-site person in charge, or is that an on-site person that's going to be in charge through the evening?
It sounds like they have some staff that works through the night, a nurse and a tech, if I'm understanding that correctly. And then during the day, they're going to increase their staffing a little bit. Somebody who comes not necessarily for the entire shift, but part of the shift.
Correct. So typically the rotating staff member would be a member of leadership, whether it was the nurse, the nurse practitioner, myself, a clinical director, or director of nursing. The rotating staff member is a member of leadership who would be there during the day. And then typically the way that residential treatment works is that at night, the nurse is the lead person who's responsible.
All right. The medication that they have to take care of the patients with, the person that's giving the medication, is that person that's giving the medication a licensed person to be giving medication in the evening after your hours are closed down?
Under our proposal, yes. that person would be licensed.
But it has not been up to this point. Is that what I'm understanding?
Under the prior approvals, the people administering the medication were not licensed. They were unlicensed medical technicians. So again, we feel that what we're proposing is actually better, both for the individuals being served and for the neighborhood. We're just increasing the level of care.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
I would eventually after Thomas.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
If you don't mind, I'd like to come over.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Get out of your way.
You gotta- he doesn't need both mics. That's okay.
I'm Tom Mead. I'm a resident of Tilton, live at 9 Philbrook Road in Tilton. And I'd like to premise this with two things, and then I'll get to the staffing portion of this. The first thing is, I think considering the staffing change and going with a medical director who can prescribe medications, separating those two things, I think is problematic, because I think they very much go hand in hand.
Well,
And
we
I-
aren't separating them. We're separating the number of people that are allowed to be on the site.
Yes.
So if we don't allow them to have a medical director, then they can still have 14 people on the site. Just one of them wouldn't be a medical director.
I understand that, but I'm suggesting that making the decision sequentially rather than considering in effect the whole package. Just as an observation, I think that's somewhat problematic.
I don't think the intent is to consider them individually. I think the intent is to have the discussion on each thing so that it doesn't kind of get mired in the mud as we go through each one.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The second bit of preamble is to put this, at least in what I think is the context. And for me, the context, and I think for the town, the context was the site plan that was approved in 2017. So that was the program that was presented for the use of this property in 2017, at which time adult care facilities were a permitted use in the rural agricultural zone. Subsequent to that, the town voted to no longer have adult care facilities as a permitted use. That obviously, as you stated before, triggered the facility to become a non-conforming use. However, the appropriateness of the use of the site to its location in a rural agricultural zone, the town has spoken. The town has said it's not an appropriate use. However, we recognize that the current use is a permitted use by virtue of the zoning ordinances and the decisions that the town has made. So I'm trying to distinguish between appropriate use in that zone and permitted use in that zone. And I would point out that in your exceptions part of this, which you've said you're not necessarily going to go into, one of the sections in the portion of your ordinance that talks about the conditions on which you grant exceptions, one is that the use will be appropriate for the site. What I'm suggesting is changes that go beyond the 2017 site plan and the 30-bed extension. Any changes that are contemplated are by virtue of what the town has done in the zoning amendment are not appropriate uses. Existing use is permitted, allowing additional changed use. I think you're extremely well within your rights to say this really isn't appropriate for this location, because that's what the town has said. So there's no, I don't think there should be any presumption that if it's an extension of what's going on now, that automatically makes it an appropriate use in this location. So those are a little bit preliminary. To go on to the specific issue of the staff, in the submission of the applicant, I would bring to your attention specifically the questions around the technology being used to closely monitor. I think the words actually are to monitor continuous and precise observation of the clients. It sounds very nice. The 2017 site plan and the discussion by the planning board at the time contemplated counseling services being given to clients who come in not in crisis, not in need of medication that needed to be changed once they were on site. In other words, a residential, non-critical clientele coming to that site. So my question is, there's certainly, I think at those discussions in 2017, the board might have thought a little bit if they had been told at that time, we're going to need to have technology or people to precisely and continuously observe our clients. To me, that sounds like a qualitative change in the requirements at this facility. So that's my reaction to the need for having precise and continuous monitoring. So there's several references to that. I'll come back. I think it's a bit tangled up in the medical director's role and the need to have someone there who can prescribe medicine. Other comments are, I have mixed feelings about the emphasis on veterans and first responders. In my view, it's a somewhat cynical representation to the town and the board. There's nowhere in the application is there a commitment to do so. And as a veteran, I think it is somewhat manipulative, the emphasis on in their application to this board, and it does not seem to be directly relevant to the proposal. So I think those are my observations with respect to the staff increase part of this. If you'll indulge me, I will probably come back
Of course. Thank you.
in a bit.
Would you like for us to save response to comments until everyone has talked?
That's probably the easiest thing, just to keep it clean as long as
Yep.
you guys are all on board with that.
Yep.
Anyone else in the room like to speak? We haven't forgotten about you online quite yet.
There's one back there.
Hi, Richard Brown. I live at 370 Lancaster Hill Road. It's about a quarter mile from the facility. My first question is are detox services offered at the facility? And the reason for my question is, does that have anything to do with the additional medical staff? And if detox facility, or if you plan on starting offering detox services to people who are chemically dependent, what risk mitigation measures are there in place to ensure that nobody's operating a vehicle to your facility?
Absolutely. We are not currently seeking to operate a detox facility at 100 Autumn Drive. We have a detox at our other location in Antrim.
Okay. Does it answer your question, Lana?
Yeah, it does. I too am a veteran, and I've had, as a neighbor of you, had incidents with clients leaving the program to where I had to call Tilton PD. However we can mitigate that further would be really appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you for your service. Another facility that I have worked at in the past, we had a good neighbor policy. It was located in a residential zone, way out of town, so there wasn't really anywhere for clients to go. So if a client chose to leave the property on foot, we offered to give them a ride. If they refused a ride, then we followed them. We would implement a similar policy here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, This individual was sitting in oncoming traffic at the edge of my driveway on the back side of a hill, where she was definitely a danger to herself. And she didn't strike me as a veteran from my initial conversation with her.
Thank you for bringing that up to us. I would be happy, to share my card or the admissions number. If anything like that was to arise again, I would be happy to send someone to reach out to those individuals now. As it stands currently, it's not operated as a residential facility currently, which is a different level of oversight. But again, if something were to come up, I'd be happy to have someone reach out to those individuals and help mitigate that situation.
Okay, thank you.
There was somebody online that wanted to speak.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Perfect. So good evening. My name is John Steele. I'm the abutter to 100 Autumn Drive. I actually own 80 Autumn Drive, which is 55 acres directly surrounding all of the property there at 100, directly across from Thomas Mead, whom you heard from earlier. So obviously I'm here to formally oppose the growth of the institution. Personally, when I was watching I think it was the planning video from last 2 weeks ago, obviously their intent is to be a facility of size where they have 50 to 60 staff and 50 to 60 patients there, right? And this is a step in that direction towards growing towards that size, right? But my key arguments here are only going by the town of Tilton's zoning guidance, and many of my quotes are used directly from the zoning ordinance in Tilton. But when I look at how this property is being classified currently, this hospital definition that is in the zoning ordinance, it states an institution providing health services primarily for inpatients and medical and surgical care of the sick or injured, including as an integral part of the institution, such related facilities as laboratories, outpatient department, training facilities, central service facilities, and staff offices. So when I looked at how this property was acquired, and also listening to the planning meeting from 2 weeks ago, John Flanagan, their VP, stated that we have over 37 facilities now nationwide that are substance abuse facilities. And also we have 10 behavioral health hospitals for acute psychiatric disorders. So when I look at how this property was acquired through this acquisition, basically they're operating as a hospital now by the town's own zoning ordinances. And so when I look at that, I believe that they're out of compliance now and operating in this way because it is a hospital based on the town's ordinance definition. Secondly, when I look at the section 9.2, it specifically states that not substantially different in its purpose and manner of application and no more harmful or objectionable to the neighborhood. And obviously, as you've heard, the two abutters that are contesting this do have objections to this, and it is operating as a hospital based on the zoning ordinance. Secondly, you have a negative impact on the neighborhood, and in the handouts that I provided to the zoning board there's a study by the American Journal of Health and Economics that says disorder treatment centers decrease value properties from anywhere from 3.4 to 4.6%. In addition, the proposed changes in traffic, noise, and disruption will negatively impact the surrounding area, which I think we've all heard that there have been some incidences in which patients are not being monitored closely enough. And I think that there, if approved, should at least be some mitigation strategies to that, such as a fence to surround the entire property that is opaque and to the zoning board's approval. But as Thomas Mead said, there has been community opposition to this. The town has voted against the 30-bed expansion, and both abutters are here saying that we really don't want this facility to grow any further. And as mentioned in the zoning guidelines and ordinances, the table that is represented on what is allowed, both the adult care facility, hospitals, and medical facilities are not zoned in this area or allowed in the zoning area. For some instances in my own circumstances, we've actually had people from the facility. One person was ice fishing on my pond, and I had to ask him just to leave as a liability. I didn't want him to get hurt. We did have a police officer come for looking for a missing persons who was apparently working at the facility. And we also had a truck driven off-site into the acreage, into the property, and it had to be towed out. So I do ask that you consider all these facts that I've presented, and then if you do decide to move forward and approve, at minimum, an 8-foot fence around the property with a gate to mitigate in and out of the patients so that they're properly watched, and obviously an opaque fence just to make sure that we don't have folks walking around up and down the streets, which I myself have seen as well. So those are my arguments against this, and I do strongly suggest that based on how you've written in the zoning ordinance and how this is not allowed and the definitions of hospitals, you guys do seek legal counsel before making any form of decision. Any questions from my presentation?
Nope, I'm all set.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? All right. We'll move to the second half, if everyone's good with that, or do
Would
you
it-
guys want to deliberate?
Would it be all right if just while everything's fresh, if I just briefly respond to a couple of the
Yeah,
points
that's
that
fine.
were
Yep,
made?
for sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So just a couple of things, and I will be brief. One of the arguments I heard sounded essentially like the board should not vote to expand the use because the town has spoken, the town has prohibited this use. And that, because of that, the board should not vote to expand it. But following that argument to its logical conclusion, the board could never grant a request under 9.3 because any non-conforming use could not be expanded if it's non-conforming. And the town.
We're here at this meeting
Right.
because it's not permitted in the place that it is.
Right,
It's a
right.
little
I
bit-
just wanted to make that point that argument, when you follow it, it renders section 9.3 completely superfluous. So I appreciate the comment, but I just wanted to make that point. In terms of, let's see, the technology and the concern that we're adding the technology because we're bringing in individuals that are at a higher level of care, I just wanted to repeat that we are staying at the residential level of care. We're not bringing in individuals that require more frequent medication, more medication changes at more of a hospital level or inpatient psych level of care. We are staying at the same level of care, but even individuals at that level of care, tweaks and modifications to their medications can be really beneficial. Next, let's see. The comment that we're looking to expand to 50 or 60 staff or 50 or 60 patients, that is not why we're here tonight. That is not what we are requesting to do. In terms of the hospital use, I do respectfully disagree that this is a hospital use. When you look at the definition of hospital use, and Mr. Steele read it correctly, it does include, seemingly as a requirement, such related facilities as laboratories, outpatient department, things like that, that we do not have. Again, this is not a hospital. This is not patients at a hospital level of care. Finally, in terms of the negative impact on the neighborhood and the suggestion that this decreases property value, again, this facility is already there. We understand that there are some concerns about things that have happened to date, but we're really here to try to improve things and to fix some of the problems that have been identified, and we do appreciate them being brought to our attention, but we really feel that the changes that we're proposing can only improve the situation. And did you want to comment briefly on the tactical recovery? There was a comment that there's no commitment to serve veterans, so we just wanted to respond briefly to that.
Sure. I just wanted to speak to Tactical Recovery, which is a program under Summit. So it's a program that's operated nationwide. It's a set of standards that each facility has to operate at in order to be branded as a tactical recovery facility. Tactical recovery facilities work with veterans and first responders and we have to provide specific types of treatment modalities, things like DBT or CBT, certain trauma therapies, things like that, along with having specific levels of staff on site in providing these therapies. So that's our commitment to being able to provide proper services to veterans and first responders, and that is our intention, is to provide services to veterans and first responders. It's a need in the community. The facility already houses veterans and first responders, and we intend to continue doing so.
Thank you. Yeah, first, please.
Doug Wade, 5 Westwood Drive, Tilton. You say you work with veterans, but you don't work with the VA of New Hampshire. Why is that?
We do work with the VA.
They don't recognize you. They don't send their patients because of their insurance company does not work with you. You may work with the VA in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is the actual VA, but the outreach Like I'm up here and I can't go to Manchester. So if I wanted your help, the outreach, you do not recognize the outreach, which is their own private insurance company that they work with. But if they were to send a VA from Manchester, a veteran from Manchester, you may service them. Your company up in Antrim has turned down, I know of 2 veterans that they wanted to send to you. You've turned them down, you didn't have the room for them. So let's just be on the table. Let's be honest. You know, VA.
Let's keep it coming up this way.
Okay,
I appreciate your input for sure.
I know. It's just,
And I don't know if maybe there's a little bit of mud in the water between the previous owners and the new facilities. I'm not totally clear on when the ownership has changed, which is one of the questions I had here. March. Okay.
okay.
So you recently purchased this facility?
Correct. Summit purchased the facility at March 1st.
So I don't know if it's specifically about Summit or about the facility at 100 Autumn Drive that we're.
Right. This is the one at Autumn Drive.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Also, one other thing I want to note, one of your patients came to my house and tried to break in, and this is recorded by the Tilton Police Department. They have this on record. Tried to break into my house, and they were found to go back into the facility. This, of course, must have been before you owned it, but it was the previous owners. So, and they weren't a veteran.
Okay. If we're on a good spot, I'd like to keep progressing so we can get to the point where we can deliberate some of this out and let people get a chance to speak on the second half of it too. If everybody's good, you're all comfortable with voiced our opinions.
Good. All right. So you want me to go ahead with 9.2?
Please, yeah.
Okay. All right. So moving to medical professionals under section 9.2. I am going to read section 9.2. I know I noted earlier it's a little long, but I'm going to read it just so we're on the same page. So section 9.2 of the ordinance provides that, quote, the Board of Adjustment may order the issuance of a permit for any non-conforming use to be changed to another non-conforming use, not substantially different in its purpose and manner of application and no more harmful or objectionable to the neighborhood, provided that the building involved shall neither be structurally altered nor enlarged to an extent in the aggregate greater than 20% in volume and 50% of the assessed value of the building and land as of the date of passage of this ordinance. The extension must be of the same or better type of material and construction as the original building. No non-conforming use, if once changed to a use permitted in the district in which located, shall be changed back to a non-conforming use. So a lot to break down there. But the first thing I'll say, and which I've already mentioned, we're not proposing any structural physical change to the property. So none of that is really at issue here. The 2 factors that come out of that are really important are the proposed use is not substantially different in purpose and manner of application, and the proposed use is no more harmful or objectionable to the neighborhood. So turning to the first one. The proposed use is not substantially different in purpose and manner of application. So the existing approvals are for a residential care facility for adults in need of assistance with substance use disorder. They do provide counseling is provided, medication is administered, again, albeit it's prescribed off-site. The applicant really proposes to continue with a lot of that same procedure. So the only change is that they plan to do so with the employment of medical professionals, again, to improve the quality of care. I've heard a lot about, concerns about the way things have been operated in the past. So I just really want to emphasize that we are seeking to improve a lot of that. While we view this change as small, we do view it as a substantial improvement. And we don't view those changes, again, it's sort of the same. We have counseling, we have medication. Previously, we have counseling and we have medication now. The only difference is who's prescribing the medication, who's caring or providing care to the individuals that are being served. The proposed use is no more harmful or objectionable to the neighborhood. Again, the employment of medical professionals is no more harmful or objectionable to the neighborhood. This change isn't even something that will be visible from outside the building. I know there's a concern that we're bringing in people that are sort of at a higher level of care. And I know I've said it a million times, but I'll say it again, we are not. We are staying at this same residential level of care. We're just improving the care that we're able to provide to them. And again, that change is not something that will be visible from outside the building. So it would be really difficult to conclude that it's somehow harmful to the neighborhood. And full disclosure, I know it sounds like the board is going to be bringing this matter to town council. And I do believe that a determination that the employment of medical professionals alone somehow makes this use more objectionable would present some concerns under state and federal discrimination laws, just because essentially, especially where there's no difference from the outside, what's essentially being said is, well, we're okay with individuals that don't need a doctor on site, but if they do need a doctor on site, we don't want them. And that's sticky, and that could be a problem. So if you're going to go to council to discuss this, I would definitely raise that issue with him or her. And again, we don't propose any structural alteration to or enlargement of the building. So that is our argument under 9.2.
So I just, because I'm not totally understanding, how does the addition of this staff, how will that improve some of the concerns of the abutters in here? Like what specific things will that help mitigate?
Yeah, so I know that there are concerns about individuals being served leaving the property, not being completely monitored. So having this additional medical staff on site will improve the ability for the facility to kind of keep track of people. Felicia and John, you want to add to that?
Hi, John Flanagan. You've heard my name mentioned a couple times. I just wanted to say, first of all, that we will commit to limiting the beds to the 32 beds that were 30, the 30 beds that were approved previously, with the understanding we will tie into the sewage and water of the city. We're prepared to do that. We'll commit to put a fence around the property, but I want you to imagine if we did tie into this sewer and water, or if the previous owner did and followed through with what they said they were going to do, you would have up to 30 people there now being served there in a very loose way in terms of the state of New Hampshire does not oversee sober living right now. They do not license sober living. Now they're considering it, but this is going to take us and allow us to get a state license. And then once we're state licensed, we're under the scrutiny of New Hampshire and state regulations and things like that. I'll give you an example. The elopement the gentleman was talking about, that'll kick into a incident report in our company. We now own and operate this facility. We want it to be safe. So that'll kick it into an incident report, which then would cause an after action review. How did it happen? How can we do better? There's none of that going on. There was none of that going on there previous. We're a large company. We have a risk management department, a quality assurance department, and we take these things very seriously. So we're going to embrace improving that. That's not acceptable. Somebody being able to just walk off, go into somebody's yard like that, that'll stop. And that's where Observe Smart comes in. We'll put a fence in. We won't go over the 30 beds. And I know more about water and sewage than I even want to talk about. We are going to tie in to the sewage and water eventually. But if you know anything about New Hampshire and construction and those kinds of challenges, everybody's got a waiting list. So we're like a year away from that getting done. So we just want to get the 9 beds now so we can get our state license and then actually start to improve the way the care is managed there. So that's all I have to say. Any questions for me?
I have a question.
All right, thank you.
No, I have a question for you. One question. So when you get state license, if you get state license, things are going to, get better. You're going to have more restrictions and like that. Were they required before the new company bought them? Were you required for those reports? Were they required to do that stuff? Were they laxed in doing that? Should they have been doing
The
it?
previous owners?
Yeah, the previous owners.
I would say yes. And I would say that that's part of the misrepresentation to you guys as to what maybe would go on there. And so what we're proposing is just, we're going to tighten up the operation.
So am I hearing if you get, state licensed, you're saying it's going to, get stricter around there. The other owners were required to do the same thing, and it should have already been happening, or no?
No, sir. It was never licensed as a treatment facility like we're going to license it.
Yep.
So it'll tighten things up.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions for me? We'll have to move to public comment. So please just hold on to your question. Don't forget it. Yeah, we have to just follow the formality of the meeting. But please don't forget your question, please. Do you guys have anything else on that?
Well, I guess On the first issue that we were discussing of going from on-site from 12 to 14 by having 2 additional staff, I'm gathering that that issue right there did not include that of those 2 additional people on staff, that there would be someone who would be prescribing meds. Is that correct? Or would that preclude anyone who might be there from prescribing meds on site?
Do you want to get that one?
I don't fully understand.
To clarify, are you asking, is the person who's prescribing meds included in the 14 individuals, or are you asking if that's an extra person?
No, I'm just saying, would that be part of the 14? Because right now, I believe you were asking for the 2 additional people. And I can imagine for just 9 beds to ask for 2 additional staff people to take care of what is going on within the facility. I personally don't see any objection to that, nor do I necessarily see that as any kind of a change of use. But I believe that there is a whole separate issue of being able to have someone on staff who's going to be prescribing medications. And so I'm wondering, by allowing or permitting 2 additional staff people, would that mean that someone would be on site that would be prescribing meds?
So, I mean, I think it's this is sort of where we were talking about how we might need to separate them out because it is kind of 2 separate requests. We are requesting to increase staff people. If you guys approve, you'd say, yep, you can increase staff, but you can't have medical professionals. I mean, we'd increase staff, but none of them would be prescribing medications.
That's how I understand it also. That we have like 2 things, whether we're going to allow 14 people to be in that building at any given time, and then also the thing to consider, which is whether or not they can have a prescribing. I'm losing my words here, but that's how I understand it.
No, I agree.
Any more questions for them before we go to public comment?
Nope.
Oh, good.
All set.
All right. Any public comment?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So the prior owner had mentioned some time ago that he was leasing the property to the company that acquired it. Could we get some understanding if you guys were leasing the property prior to the acquisition, and if so, for how long?
No, part of the acquisition of sobriety centers as a whole, we leased some properties from them that were had lease arrangements like Antrim, Laconia Outpatient. They're leased. We acquired in total the Recovery Mountain property, so we own it. That was part of the closing in March, included closing that property. So we own that property.
Okay,
Did
but
that
you were
answer your
not
question?
leasing it prior to owning it, correct?
That's correct. The previous operators were, and that was Bob Callahan who owned it, and we bought it from Bob. And that
Okay.
was contingent
And
upon the closing. So
okay, and in that March, did you transition staff or is it the same staff?
did we transition staff in March?
Meaning,
Felicia was already on board. Many of the staff at sobriety centers stayed with us. Some, of course, when you do an acquisition, leave. But I don't know what the attrition rate was or if staff turned over a whole lot at the mountain.
okay.
We have employed a significant amount of new leadership for sobriety centers since the acquisition. We've added roles such as the director of quality management. We've added a new medical director. We've added new nurse practitioners. So we have added an additional amount of staff who are able to oversee, and there was a significant amount of turnover with change that happens. So we were able to work with individuals who had a like-minded mission and wanted to move forward with sobriety centers in our vision moving forward.
So the staff that you mentioned, is that specific to Autumn Drive or specific to your general business?
Specific to our general business, there is a house manager at Autumn Drive. There is not additional staff above and beyond because it's
Okay.
not a residential.
Is the house manager the same as what was there prior, or is that new?
Currently, yes. If we seek licensure and we're able to move forward with that, there will not be a house manager there any longer because there will be the paid staff, the techs and the nurses, counselors who are working there.
Okay, thank you. No further questions from me.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I had a couple of questions. I'm curious about
You
this.
just got to state who you are and where you're
Oh,
from.
Heather West, Tilton. I'm just curious about this fence that people are talking about and how that's going to be logical, because is there going to be a gate and a gatekeeper and cars are going to be coming and going? I just wonder about the practicality, because if somebody wants to get out of a 8-foot fence, they can. And at that point, is it like, if it's that much of a concern that we need a whole fence to protect the people in the neighborhood who feel like this is a threat, was that the intention of this facility from the beginning that the town approved? I'm also curious, I was at the original meetings a long time back with Bob Callahan when he was trying to push this through. And I feel like the town was taken advantage of, and there was a little loophole. They found a loophole and got through. And I wonder, like, adult daycare facility, I believe was the term that was used. Was the original intention to turn into this? Was the understanding that there was going to be medication distributed and dispersed to patients at this facility when this was originally passed? And if this was all coming up back then, would it have been approved as an adult care facility? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I thank you for those questions. I think that I can answer them, but I will let John and Felicia jump in if I get something wrong. So on the fence, I mean, we have not determined that a fence is needed. Somebody mentioned a fence tonight, and we're trying to respond to abutter concerns and help you guys be comfortable. So if the butters are comfortable with a fence, we're happy to consider adding a fence. I think that's more of a planning board issue in terms of getting into the weeds on a gate or a gatekeeper, pieces like that. This project will be going before the planning board separately. So that's something that we're happy to discuss more details before the planning board. We certainly wouldn't be adding the fence because we view this as a threat. In terms of the adult care facility, if you were to go back and review the minutes from the 2017 approval, they do address the administration of medication and counseling services. So it was always intended to be a facility where medication is administered, where counseling is provided, and where individuals with substance use disorder are treated.
Answer your question? Any further questions?
I'm just curious.
Well, you just gotta state who you are and where you're from.
I'm Lisa Huckins. I live on Scenic Lane, which is off of Lancaster. I'm just curious as to what end. What is the diagnosis? Is our children and grandchildren going to be safe? Is it strictly drugs and alcohol, or is there some sort of sexual behaviors that the neighborhood should be aware of?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So something we had addressed during the planning board is the background check requirement that was in the 2017 planning board approval. And we wanted to mitigate concerns of that based on our admission screening guidelines. So each client, individual served who comes to us, has a pre-assessment that's done over the phone before they're able to be admitted to our facility. The pre-assessment asks an enormous amount of questions: medications, medical history, criminal history, open charges, probation, different things like that. And anyone who falls within a certain category we have an approval matrix. Anyone who falls within a certain category reports that they have any violent offenses, any sexual offenses, anything to those nature has to be approved by an administrator. We do not currently accept, we take on a case-by-case basis anyone who has any history of sexual offenses, but any aggravated sexual offenses are not accepted to our facilities. There are certain, what's the word I'm looking for? There's certain instances where someone may be considered, but it would have to be approved by our director of clinical services, mostly because it's also a threat to the individual who's being served and other individuals in the community. There tends to be, clients are not tended to be welcomed when they have a history of sexual offenses. So we're not typically able to provide care for them.
Does it answer your question?
Somewhat, but I scouts. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. I'll sit on it for a minute.
We appreciate your concern, and that's absolutely another issue that will be discussed in depth before the planning board. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
I want my grandchildren to be able to walk
Absolutely.
home from the bus stop.
absolutely.
Right
Yep.
now, it's safe.
I got a question.
May I comment on that?
We have to let public go first. Any other public comment? Oh, yep, online. Sorry, I missed it.
In the planning meeting 2 weeks ago, it was brought up that you were trying to waive the background checks for incoming patients. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
No. He said that in the planning meeting, you guys were trying to waive the background check requirement. Is that, and he asked if that was correct.
No, we're not trying to waive the background check requirement. We will, when we go before the planning board, be seeking to modify it because the way it's currently drafted, it's not lawful. And so it's going to need to be modified, but we're not seeking to waive it. We have our own background check procedures that we're hoping to discuss with the board and come up with something that the board is comfortable with.
Does that answer your question?
In what way are you looking to modify it? And in what procedures or federal regulation is it not legal from your opinion?
So there's a federal statute, 42 CFR Part 2, that protects the personal health information of all individuals who are seeking treatment from substance abuse. So we cannot ask for, that information. We can't ask for a background check to be done, and we can't share that specifically with other individuals in the community without a release on file. So part of the approval was to have those results shared with the police department, which would be breaking the privacy and the HIPAA of our clients who are in treatment.
So I just, because I'm confused now. So obviously you are not tied to what's the rough proposal you're looking to do instead? Like what is happening now and what is it that is the change that you're looking to move towards? A rough outline.
So for admission to our facilities, what we do is that pre-admission assessment.
What's happening for Autumn Drive?
The pre-admission assessment.
Okay. And then there's a piece with the town. Am I understanding that correctly?
Not currently.
Not currently. Okay. So I guess I'm lost at what you're looking to change.
Yeah. And honestly, that's really, we're happy to discuss it. It's really more of a planning board issue.
Okay,
and something that we will absolutely come totally prepared to discuss in the weeds when we go before the planning board. But I don't think it's particularly relevant to the requests that are on the table tonight.
Thank you. Any further follow-ups online? Mr. Steele, I think is his last name. I can't really read.
No, thank you. None at this time.
Anyone else? Oh, fine. Go ahead.
So I think that the topic at the moment is the addition is under 9.2, the change in use, which is the addition of the medical director who would be able to prescribe medicines on site.
Correct.
So in the applicant's material, much was made of, well, this is no big deal. Medications were being administered on site as long as they were prescribed off site. In my view, what this does is qualitatively change the nature of the services that the facility will be able to provide in the future. The models they cited in terms of the other facilities in New Hampshire and Summit's own business, and I provided screenshots for the board, each of those facilities offers detox services. Now, we've heard earlier that the plan is for this facility to continue to operate as a residential care facility. My question is, my assumption is, if a medical director is put on staff, they will be able to offer detox services. A question I have for the board is, if this use is allowed, will there be any reason for the board to be requested permission to perform detox services at this facility? Once you have allowed the staff that would be necessary
we can
for
box
such.
this facility into whatever we'd like as a town via either through the planning board or through the zoning board. So if as a town, we don't want it to be able to offer detox facilities, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Pat, we can say you can put a doctor on staff, but you can't do detox there.
Okay.
So I think that probably helps alleviate your concern as far as not letting the scope creep of the facility come in.
I simply would like to alert the board to this is what this next step is being facilitated by this decision.
I think we can prevent that step. I understand your concern. I think is scope creep, if I'm reading what you're trying to get at correctly. And I would imagine that there are plenty of stopgaps that we can put in either through this board or planning to prevent that from happening in that neighborhood.
Another observation I would have is that what has gone on at the facility so far, it's been said that that's been under the past management and there's new management. I think the board and the town, all you have control over is the use of the site. This is not necessarily the same group that's going to be operating that site next year. Who knows? So I would say that representations with respect to the management are different than the restrictions that are placed and the allowances that are made for the facility. Finally, I guess I would want to once again return to the notion of whether this is an appropriate use for the site. It seems that one of the things that the planning board was very concerned with and put into the site plan were two things. One was the background checks, and the other was that there would be no medications prescribed on site. That was part of the discussion at the time the 2017 site plan was approved. So in effect, if this change in use is permitted, you're basically saying, we're not so concerned with what the planning board had to say. In fact, we can allow a change in use that is exactly contrary to what the planning board put into the site plan by inference through their discussion. The other observation I would make, and this goes a little bit to who is running the facility, on that site plan specifically, explicitly, was the requirement that background checks would be done by a third party. So the town was not responsible for doing background checks. All that the planning board asked was that they be done by a third party and that they be placed with the chief of police of Tilton. Just, here it is. We did it. Here it is. So that may or may not have run afoul to federal laws. However, there is no evidence that it was ever done. The code enforcement officer has nothing in the records to suggest that those background checks were ever performed.
Well, it sounds like he shouldn't have that. It should be the chief of police.
Nor is there in the record any statement from the facility saying, here is why we are not doing the background checks. So I'm concerned, obviously, that something that the planning board expressly put into the site plan was apparently ignored. And it doesn't give me a lot of confidence in the actions taken by the planning board or other boards as they meet the way that facilities are then operated. So
I couldn't speak to whether or not the code enforcement agent would have access to that information. That's just outside of my purview of knowledge. So I don't know whether or not that's a bad thing that the code enforcement agent didn't have that. I can't speak to it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting the code enforcement agency code enforcement officer did anything improper. I'm simply saying there is no evidence that that portion of the site plan was ever adhered to. And we know that the site has had staff and has had clients. So my suspicion is that there were no background checks.
Thank
In conclusion, I, along with John, do urge the board not to provide the ground for the change in the nature of the services rendered by the facility going forward.
Thank you. Any more public comment?
One from me, please.
Yep, for sure. Do you think, I haven't been catching you. You just got to state who you are each time you talk, just for the minutes, just to. Fortunately, you're the
Oh,
only
no
one
problem.
online tonight, but.
Yeah. John Steele, 80 Autumn Drive. I just wanted for the record to state that both abutters are present and that we firmly oppose any expansion or extended use of the facility. And that's it.
Thank you
Thank you for your
input.
time.
Any further public comment? You guys good to close and deliberate? Close public comment and deliberate?
I think Chuck had a question.
I'm all set right now.
Okay, I do have one
Yeah,
question
please.
on the medical staffing. And my question would be whether or not there would be a dispensary on site that would be stocked with various different medications that might be in order.
Sure, I can answer that. Felicia Orchard. So typically what happens at a residential care facility, which is also happening in Antrim, is we have something called an omni-cell. Sometimes they're called a Pyxis. It just depends on which pharmacy you're working with. And in that is a very limited number of medications. And then a pharmacy delivers medications on a daily basis. So very limited number of medications would be in that. With 9 beds, I would honestly have to look into whether it was actually even financially appropriate to have that on site or whether we would just have the medications delivered on a daily basis. Our other facility is a larger facility with 35 beds, and we have a very small amount of medications on site.
May I follow up?
Yeah, please.
You're considering a 30-bed facility, and my concern would be that this is a substantial change of use, and that this might engender some problems with the police and enforcement of people breaking into your facility. Not necessarily people breaking out, but people breaking in for these controlled substances.
So the way that an omni-cell works is that it's fingerprinted. So a nurse has to have their fingerprint registered with the omni-cell, and that's the only way that you can get a medication out of the machine. I can say that I've worked in substance abuse treatment for 5 years, and I haven't seen someone breaking into a facility in order to take medications out. That's not to say that's never happened in the history of substance use treatment, but I haven't witnessed that, nor have I heard about that.
Anything else?
This is probably inappropriate, but the whole idea of one of these omni cells, I think one of the biggest issues that people have had is that employees at hospitals themselves have been taking and stealing meds. So I'm not so sure it's 100% proof that something like that couldn't happen. But I'm just saying that this, I mean, clearly when you watch the news and whatever, that happens all the time. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Can I respond to that quickly?
yeah, please.
So part of being licensed by the state of New Hampshire is that staff do have to have a background check completed. So we screen all of our staff. We're asking for references. And there are counts that are completed each shift on an omni-cell as well. Of course, there's always room for error, but those are the safeguards that are put into place to mitigate that risk.
I have a question about your good neighbor policy. Can you just expand on what that is and like how you see that working in this facility if this is approved and given it in that neighborhood? Like,
Sure.
what does that look like
Absolutely.
for this community?
Absolutely. So the good neighbor policy that I've utilized at other facilities means that if a client is leaving property, they want to, it's called against medical advice, AMA from treatment, and they're unwilling to work with us on a ride, unwilling to call someone for a ride. They're like, I'm out of here. And they take off on foot. So then what we would do, we would get in one of our staff vehicles and we would be following them. We would be encouraging them to get into the vehicle with us. If they were unwilling to do so, we would continue to follow them until a prescribed distance away from the facility. At that point, if they're still aggressive, if they're hostile, then we're contacting the local authorities to ask them for support, or also just let them know, hey, this is what's going on. We just want you to be aware. But we're following them out of the neighborhood.
And do you have vehicles so that I'm inferring from that there's a vehicle there 24 hours a day for a staff member to jump into?
Absolutely. For a residential facility, yes.
Right, okay. And how do you know that somebody's left?
So the hour rounding is part of that, right? So we have to follow up with clients every hour, but also in a facility that's as small as 9 clients, you're laying eyes on those clients all the time. I'm not going to say there's never a chance that someone's going to leave without you noticing that that's happened. But with the hour rounding, we typically are able to catch someone in a quick enough manner that we're able to jump right in behind them.
Thank you. Did you look like you were getting ready to ask something, Chuck?
I was, but it slipped me momentarily.
Okay.
Is public comment closed?
We have not actually closed.
No, I
We
do.
have not closed for deliberation yet.
Okay, my other question had to do is whether or not this facility, which we've heard here, would be projected to go to 30 beds. And then I'm wondering how many additional staff would you need beyond what you are projecting right now? And then if this were to go to 30 beds, I could see that would be a real issue in the neighborhood.
I think, permit me to answer here I think that the staffing has nothing to do with the number of patients per se. They could have 30 staff here if they wanted to once you were hooked up to sewer. The on-site limitation is due to the septic system. But
Right, that's
once
correct.
they hook up to sewer, they could put as many employees as they wanted.
But I think
say.
to answer the
30 beds.
30 beds, right.
To answer the question, I think it's in our application materials, but for the 30 beds, we were projecting 14 staff persons.
Thank you.
You had a question online?
Yes, John Steele, 80 Autumn Drive. Just in comment to actually following a patient outside on Autumn Drive, and I don't know if any of you have driven on Autumn Drive, but it is a relatively thin road. People drive very fast there, and I would be concerned for folks' safety driving up and down that road if there was a vehicle kind of slowly following a patient on that road. And I just wanted that to be noted.
Thank you. I think you answered this, so I apologize. I just got to clarify some questions I had here. You don't currently accept any critical patients. You are taking patients who've been screened. They don't come to your facility looking for help. They come somewhere else, and then they get housed in that facility on Autumn Drive. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, yep, please.
Doug Wade, 5 Westwood Drive. This area also is a very hunted area. If the person escapes and does not go down a nice safe road, tarred and everything like that, where everybody can see them, they got trails to run through woods. It's a very big hunting season. We have a lot of hunters in that area. Never know what can happen during the season. Now, I know at nighttime they don't hunt during nighttime unless it's coyote or whatever, but a lot of coyotes are hunted in that area. So I just want to make sure that people know that if these people start running through woods and there are hunters out there, well, do if I do and damned if I don't.
Thank you.
Do you have one more comment just on my end?
I think we're going to keep moving forward here. We've had a lot of public comment. I think it's time that we move to deliberating on this.
Very good. Thank you.
We're going to close public comment and we're going to move to deliberation as long as you guys have no further questions.
I just want to clarify one thing.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so right now you're approved for 30 beds if you hook up to the septic system, sewer. And for those 30 beds that you're already approved for, if you hook up to the sewer system, you'll need 14 staff to do it. Okay. So, okay.
Any other questions? Satisfied? Good check?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll close the public comment and questioning and we'll move to deliberation. Any initial thoughts?
My initial thought is, sorry.
No, go please.
Is by approving it, things might be getting tighter up there, getting more restrictive, might be better for the neighborhood because of the, you know, of the levels of the
Brian, talk into the
security.
mic. Please talk into
Yeah,
the mic.
I'm sorry, level of security
Increase
and like
staff.
that's gonna go up. These are gonna have more staff. They have the technology now they've installed, so that hopefully things are gonna get better there than in the past. So to me, I'm looking at it as it should improve the neighborhood, what they're asking to do.
I think that, Brian, there's two different issues still in my mind, and one is a staffing issue, and the other is potentially a change of use. I think that, in my opinion, the increase in staff does not sound like it's creating any untoward change of use. They're just helping the patients to a greater degree and hopefully helping the community as well.
Your thoughts, Chuck?
Oh, I agree with what Jim said. Right now, I think that that's a separate issue. And I mean, I'm all set with the increase of staff of 2 additional people. Right now, I am not unsure of the other one without some legal counsel. And right now, I'm kind of not leaning in favor of, if we have to vote for this as a single package, I am not leaning right now in favor of approving this. I'm just telling you where I am right now.
No, yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's where we're, for sure. I think I'm mostly with Brian, that I think that there's clearly a concern in the neighborhood that is totally valid. I think that what is proposed here improves on that concern. The facility is not going away, so the concern will remain regardless of what happens here. And I think that this, definitely the staffing helps that. I don't see with the cap that we limit the options that they can do with that facility to what they're currently doing. I don't really personally see how having somebody who can prescribe the medications on site is any different than getting the prescription filled off site, other than that's just an efficiency of operations. They're going to have the same medications there. They're going to have the same volumes of medication there. It's just whether the person who writes the script is in an office down the street or the person who writes the script is sitting in the building. So I don't see that as a change of use because of that, with the scope limitation. That's my outlook on it. Now, what I would really like to have is some legal counsel on the verbiage for that scope. That's kind of my stance currently. And especially because this isn't falling into a special exception and it's not falling into a regular variance. So the parameters which it's voted on, like we're not turning to these hard spelled out criteria. I don't know how y'all feel about that.
At this point, I'm gonna make a motion that could be easily voted down by the rest of this, but I'm gonna move that we table a decision on this until the next meeting and seek legal counsel.
Motion's been made.
I'll second it.
Made and seconded by Jim. I apologize, my brain froze. Yeah, I think that we got to get some answers on how this goes. I would love to have some legal counsel on wording this right so that the concerns of the community are met, and that this, because I guess almost the bigger concern to me is that they just add 30 beds, which they're well within their purview to do. Mm-hmm. And clearly the style that has been happening was not a style that worked. And so now it'll just be 30 beds of a facility that wasn't working for our community. And I guess the question I have is how to kind of make sure that what the package that's been presented to us follows through, and how to legally frame that.
Well, I think that there's a difference, and I want to get legal counsel on this, that if you have medical professionals on site, then you're becoming more of a medical clinic or a hospital type of use, which would be a change of use to something that's not allowed within the zone.
Well, this isn't allowed within the zone anyways.
But this is a pre-existing non-conforming use that's now potentially being expanded by allowing it to be a hospital type of use.
Right.
Is this relevant to the motion to table?
Well, I guess it is. It's just what we're looking for legal counsel on, I think.
So I would like to see legal counsel on this.
Did anybody?
It's been made and seconded, so if there's no further discussion on his motion.
Clarification on that, please. Are you tabling it to the following meeting, or are you tabling it to a special meeting?
That's a great question that we didn't specify.
We haven't specified.
I would be open to, if you guys are trying to schedule a special meeting so that we could see legal counsel and then hear this at the next zoning meeting with legal counsel follow-up. That would,
The issue I see there is if legal counsel can do it,
in a month.
or no, a special meeting.
The next zoning would be August 20th.
I would.
If we can get legal counsel in on an off Tuesday, and get you all together, would the board be acceptable to that?
Yes.
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 Okay.
So how would you like that motion worded then?
I think you've worded it and just say to meet when legal is available.
The motion to table until our next meeting or until after we have consulted with legal counsel.
Right.
Let me write that down. Table, this is what, 10/24-10 until CBA. Well, we can't, well, again, this kills me. So we're going to motion to table it to meet with legal counsel and then rehear this in the August meeting, or continue the hearing in the August meeting.
Should we have, but I think we will not consider it until we've had a chance to have legal counsel review it with the board.
I think Chuck made the motion, and you have to act on the motion. If you're going to amend the motion, then you amend the motion.
Well, to clarify it, I am supporting with what we have just discussed. If you would like me to restate it, I'll restate it.
Let's do that, just for the sake.
Okay, I would move that we table any decision on this until after we have had a chance to meet with legal counsel. And if in fact we can meet with legal counsel prior to, then we would have this at our next meeting on August 20th.
Awesome.
Is that clear?
Yes.
All right, motion been made and seconded.
I will amend my second to what Chuck said.
Made and
Unless
seconded.
I need to
amended.
restate it, I'd like to have it in front of me so I can read it.
Okay. We've been doing a roll call vote, Patricia, Pat, and I was reading the case law the other day, and that's what we got to do until we vote to do it differently. So
yes,
if you would do that for us.
You want me to do that?
Yeah, well, that's how we did it in the past.
All right, roll call vote. Chuck?
Yes, on the motion.
Brian?
Yes, on the motion.
Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Motion been made and passed. Thank you, everyone, for coming in.
Thank you.
I'll also thank all the abutters.
Thank you, everyone, for coming in. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seal.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back. How's it going?
Welcome back.
All right. It's probably just there in case. Just in the interest so we can keep going with the meeting, if you guys would just move your discussing downstairs if you're not staying for the rest of it.
Hey, we get the rain out there.
Yeah.
All right.
Steve, I get to spread out more
Yes.
than you do.
Which I'm sure having noticed in public and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can
Not a problem.
go ahead.
These are mine.
All right.
That's another part of the case, that this is just the unit. So, the other
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, we'll move on to case
All
ZB 24-07. Thank you for moving yours afterwards.
My pleasure. I was educated. There's a lot to that. My name is John Bernard. I'm here for a variance for 40 units comprising of 10 different structures and 4 units in each of the structures. There was a few questions and comments that I want to address. We went out, we walked the site. I appreciate you all taking the energy and the effort to do that, so thank you. I guess one of the first things was about the watershed. So I met with U-Haul. We walked the site. We spent about an hour out there, and they were pretty convinced that it was just a freak of nature. They still think of maybe us removing the trees that had something to do with it. They don't seem to have any problem. But all I'll do is say last year we had 16 out of our 21 weekends with rain. We had 66% more rainy days last year than we normally have. Their water concerns seem to be fine. They did say to me, and I don't mind bringing it back up, they said, if you look at the plan, this is the boundary. I know I'm supposed to have a mic. Should I talk and I walk away? Getting better. They did realize that their property starts over here. So we're really not going to be involved with it. If anything, it would be the veterinarian that has more concern because of where we're going to start with these homes. I went and I met with her too. She's done some work in her backyard. She doesn't have any more issues. She said she might be here tonight, but I don't see anybody here tonight. So I wanted to address those concerns. The other one was across the street. I think we addressed it. The one that has the tractor trailer on there for a billboard. He had written a letter talking to us about traffic. I don't know where we're going to go with that one. We'll see if he's here and he wants to address it further. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about before I bring Steve up and he does the actual variance is I went to the state. The state told me that if I did less than 100 units, they were able to approve it. I went back for the driveway permits again. And after a little bit of deliberation they asked me to do a study called a wait time study, which essentially tells you when people are turning into the property, how long will they be waiting out there? And that will determine if I have to put in a turn lane or not. So I asked them, I said, hey, just tell me to put a turn lane in and we'll do it and move forward with approval. They said we still need the study. So I was waiting till I got through this. The study is expensive, it's timely, but that's the information I have for you all. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Got 2 mics going now, huh? Steve?
Thank you very much. John asked me to come to address it. Well, don't go too far because I might have to sit down halfway through it. I have a bad back, sorry. And so John asked me to come and talk about the 5 criteria for variance, which I'll do. And I just want to do this to see if, yeah, okay, so we can point down there. I'm going to get one of these things. So the existing conditions, the site is a 49.7 acres with 440 feet of road frontage here. John Bernard actually owns this parcel right here as well. And the proposal is to construct 10 buildings with 4 units in each building up in this area, which is on the hill. I wasn't at the site visit, but I have walked the site with John, and I'm very familiar with it. Did everybody here get out to see the site up on the hill? So the idea would be there would be a loop road that would come in down in this area. It would go by the outdoor boat storage facility, which is on the right, which is already constructed. There's also and I forgot how many storage units there were, but there were storage units on the left. It would go past the storage units, which are in this area here, and the road, it would be a private road that would come up here. There would also be a loop that comes down and out of this, through this lot down here, which is not shown on the plan, but I'm gonna, oh, I can't do it. John's got plastic on the plan, so I can't draw on it. But there'd be a loop road, and the exit would be on the western end of the property. This property is serviced by municipal water and sewer. John discussed the curb cut. This proposal would have to go to the planning board and would require extensive drainage design. Having been on the property, you can see where the water is going to go. It's going to go, the drainage design will send the property away from the abutting properties down into this wetland, and there's adequate room out there to put in retention ponds, drainage ponds. We haven't done the design, but the property is so large, and with our experience in this, we know that there's plenty of area out there to do the drainage that's necessary. There's 5 criteria for the granting of a variance. I won't read them so we can move this along, but I will discuss each one. Variance tests 1 and 2 are the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance tests. And in my handout, I've cited from the Harborside Associates versus Parade Residence Hotel case, which was a 2011 case. And in that case, the court indicated that the first 2 tests should be looked at together. And also the court gave us some guidance on what to look at. And what it said is, for a variance to be contrary to the public interest and inconsistent with the spirit of the ordinance, its grant must violate the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. Mere conflict with the terms of the ordinance is insufficient. So in other words, any variance is going to be in conflict with the ordinance, because that's why we're here. We're asking for relief from the ordinance. So then the court went on to say, how do you ascertain whether the basic zoning objectives are violated? And one test is examine whether the granting of the variance would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So let's talk about the essential character of the neighborhood. This property abuts, this is just east of the 93 exit 20. It's in the resort commercial zone, but it butts up to the boundary line of the regional commercial district, which is right here. And the regional commercial district is a very intensely developed area. You got the Tanger outlet, you have Lowe's, you have all the small facilities, Hobby Lobby, and they all come right up to this piece of property. So this piece of property is essentially a transition property. Route 3 and 11 in this area has many billboards on it. There are a few single-family homes left, but they're being converted at a pretty rapid pace. And I would predict within the next 5 to 10 years that there'll be no single-family homes left on the road. The values of these commercial properties have just skyrocketed. That's pretty much a known for the area. The property northwest of the subject property, which is, how far? How's that for going backwards that way? Is industrially zoned. The Nickerson Business Park is over there. There are several manufacturing facilities in there, public services in there. So that abuts on that side. On the east side is the golf course, and the golf course extends way out to the back of the property. I don't know, did you get that far out in your walk to see where the golf course was?
We went to about the midpoint, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So did you see the golf course? Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's way, way, way out there. So the abutting parcels, there's a landscape supply company located here. This is the veterinarian, and this is the storage facility, the U-Haul storage facility. So those are all commercial facilities. Again, will this change the character of the neighborhood? We don't believe it will. This is a transition lot in here. It's a very large lot. Putting these units in here won't have any impacts on the abutting properties. It makes sense. It's off the road. A lot of these other uses are right along the road. So this is a transition, and this use will not affect the essential character of the neighborhood. The second test that we're looking at is whether the grant of the variance would threaten public health, safety, and welfare. And this is sort of a technical test. The property is serviced by water and sewer. That's simple. We don't have the septic problems. We don't have well problems with well radius. And John talked about access to the site. He's working with DOT. He already has permits for what's there, and their DOT said that if, depending on what this turning study, I forgot the name of it, but the turning study says whether he's got to put the turning lane in or not. If he has to put the turning lane in, he will. And again, because it's a U-shaped driveway, the exit will be away from the hill. And am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. I want to make sure that we move on to the next. We've hit the first two tests in the 5 tests of the variance. The next test is the substantial justice. And the substantial justice test says whether the gain to the general public by denying the variance outweighs any loss to the individual. Well, in this particular case, there's really no gain to the general public. If you look at the character of the neighborhood, putting these homes in here isn't going to impact any other properties. Or in other words, there's no single family home developments next door that are going to be impacted. The golf course is so far remote from this, you didn't even see it. So that won't be impacted by it. The loss to the property owner in this particular case is that in order to develop this property in other ways, a huge infrastructure would have to be built out there. The possibility of having to build roads that meet town standards. Again, this is going to be a private road. So the possibility that the road would have to meet town standards, which is very costly to do, and would drive up the cost of doing anything out here. So there would be a huge loss to the property owner with essentially no gain to the town. Test 4, the value of surrounding properties. I think I've pretty much hit on the character of the surrounding properties. They're all commercial. This is going to be a multifamily homes in here, and there's no evidence that putting multifamily homes next to commercial use would drive down the value of abutting properties. There's just no evidence of that at all. Unnecessary hardship, if we look at the character of the land, what are the special conditions of that character of that land? Again, this is a transition parcel. We're going from a dense commercial zone, and this is the first lot in the resort commercial zone. So it's a transition zone. That's a character of the property that I believe is sort of dispositive of this. The property is also serviced by municipal water and sewer. Not all of the properties out here are serviced by water and sewer. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is sort of the end of the line, which makes this a unique piece of property. That water and sewer has not always been there. It's only come in the last few years. I think another unique what is unique about this property is what is surrounding it. This was a single family home with one house in the middle of the property. which was an interesting house. I don't know if anyone knew what happened out there, but it was full of very interesting items over time. But since then, the house was really uninhabitable and has been razed. So at this point, it's just a bare piece of land. But for the John built a garage down front and the proposed uses that are going to be coming in with the storage. Sorry. So there is no fair and substantial relationship between, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the zoning ordinance and allowing the multifamily uses out here. The last test is whether this is a reasonable use. And in this particular case, it's absolutely reasonable. It's separated from the road by the landscape company, and there will be extensive landscaping around it, which will be part of the planning board process. There's sewer out there, there's water out there, there's adequate ingress and egress. So this is a reasonable use on this piece of property. In closing, Mr. Bernard is asking the zoning board to grant a variance for the 40 units in the multifamily housing project. We believe it's met all the 5 criteria for the variance, as I've gone through, and I've written extensively more in the package that I've given you, and that's part of the record. So with that, I take questions.
Any questions?
Were you envisioning condos and apartments? Are these going to be for sale, or are they going to be rentals?
At this point, John's looking at these as rentals.
Rentals.
That doesn't
spoke briefly to it. It's interesting.
that doesn't preclude sometime in the future, bringing it in. But John's looking at this as a rental, as fair market value rentals, hoping to keep the construction costs down to keep the rental costs down.
If this variance is granted, right now it seems to be only for these 40 units. But I do believe John has plans for additional development up on the hill. And so I'm wondering, by granting the variance, does this give John virtually unlimited opportunities to develop the rest of the property? So it's might in the future very well could be not 40 units, but 200 units.
Well, John,
Pat, correct me if we're wrong here. We're granting a variance for 40 units, so no more than 40 units could be built without another variance for another unit.
That's correct. That's correct.
So he could come back and ask to build more units, but he couldn't do it without coming back to the zoning board.
That answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One more, and I guess we could put the caveat that the variance would be granted pending approval of a driveway permit from DOT.
Absolutely, and I apologize, I should have said that myself.
Yep. The turn study.
Yeah, well, I guess the only thing that would concern me about a possible turn lane is that the wetlands right in there are so close to the road between what would be proposed as the ingress and egress, or in and out, and whether or not there would even be space in there to put a, matter of fact, I think we've got a map in here in the packet that you looked at last night that actually showed the map of the wetlands and the ingress and egress. There's some maps in the back there.
I think they're talking about the turning
The
lane
loop,
up in
yeah,
this area.
the loop.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not on that particular map, but we've got
Right.
some up here that I know could be
The
shown.
loop
But-
would come out here,
Yeah.
but the turning lane, I think they're talking about up here.
Right, and they're actually,
Yeah, it will be going on the inside and not on the outside.
and
That's right.
so it'd be on the opposite side of the road than the wetlands.
Sorry, that was my fault.
There's some other maps up there if you don't see that.
I hope nobody was wearing a headphone.
Ah,
Anyway,
I mean, ultimately, it would be on him to decide whether or not it was worth it to meet the criteria that he had to, right? I mean, that would be,
yeah.
if the state says you got to build it here and building it there means he's got to spend $15 million in wetland mitigation, that would be on him to.
Right, I go
Right.
away and I come back with more storage or something. It's outrageous for a road.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. It's a tight spot for sure.
If I may, one of the considerations, I think, with the turning lane is going to be the number of residents. So the question would come, how many bedrooms are these units? They appear to be small, but are they 1, 2, or 3 or more bedrooms? considering
John,
the sewer?
John said 2 to 3 bedrooms.
Two to 3 bedrooms.
Right.
This is one showing the
And will there be parking for these vehicles? Because people
Yeah.
might be commuting to work.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they didn't really show too much on this plan, but the parking would be at the planning board. They would lay it out, and lay out exactly where those buildings are going to be within that area. But this is the concept. But
right.
The concept is that they have a garage under, so each one would have a garage under and 2 parking spots outside. That's the concept at this point.
Across this wetland here.
Is there natural gas in the road?
no.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, there is.
There's actually 2 of them,
I
2
thought
12-inch
might
lines
be.
called high pressure lines. And there's some, I can get into the weeds on that, what's going on with it, but
They won't let you connect then.
they know, so here's the weeds about it. There was supposed to be another project being done, bringing the gas up from Concord to Belmont. That got put on hold the last 2 or 3 years, and they weren't allowing anybody to hook onto it. Even the preserve that we did and the U-Haul place next door. Recently, they have reversed their decisions and they are allowing more on them. And so you can plug into those critical gas lines. There's one on each side of the road there. So at this point, I say there's gas. But that's a whole nother process that I go through with the gas company.
And we had discussed if that doesn't happen, then you would go propane.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You'd have to go propane if it doesn't work, but certainly it's preferred to have natural gas. And again, this is current events. They had shut down everything, but now they are have opened it back up. And I was talking with the guys from U-Haul, and they just received their permit to hook onto the gas line.
So I think something that's changed since the walkthrough is moving the drainage that way.
We're not moving it back. We'd move it down the hill, not back up the hill, down the hill. So.
And would there be
So it would be
There'll
going
be
in this
settlement
direction.
ponds.
drains along the driveway to move the water that way? Or
Yeah.
how would you?
All the
yeah.
water will go.
There'd be catch basins.
Okay.
There'd be catch basins that are underground.
It all goes that way.
It all goes that way.
Whatever they designed, then in sediment ponds and.
It's
That mitigates the risk to the
Yeah,
abutters if the water's
I mean,
going
it's-
the opposite direction.
John will be spending some money on subsurface drainage on this.
Thank you, Steve.
Just to clarify, the state on the turn study, if they give you the driveway permit, and you said that was going to be good for up to 100 units?
That's what they said. They said that is the big change, is
Yeah.
100 units. So when I first came in here, they told me, no problem, I'm approved.
Yeah.
Okay. Time goes by, I call them, I go back into another meeting, and they came back, and it gets pushed up the ladder of command. And they said that they wanted to have a weight study done. So I said, what's a weight study? And they said, well, basically what it determines, how long does a car have to wait in its position before it can take the left-hand turn? If it's longer than whatever their prescribed number is, and that's determined by a traffic study, engineer of a traffic study, then all they said is you're going to have to put in a third lane so people can wait and the traffic can still go by. And I went back to him and I said, well, just tell me I have to do a third lane and I'll walk in with my permits and say I have to put a third lane in. But they said they can't do that. They need the weights.
They need to study.
That's how it works.
They get a free study out of it. Is what happened.
And
Well, it's probably to make sure that the change to the town is justified, would be my impression, is
Yeah.
that changing
Yeah.
that much of the structure of the road is
Right.
justified by
Sure.
the traffic study backing it up.
Right.
and the water and sewer now is across the street, isn't it? Down a little bit.
It's not very far. Oh, it's right across the street underneath the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
So we'll bore
You have to go underneath the railroad tracks out to Route 3.
right and across. It's a very short
Yeah.
distance for that. It's 150 feet.
Yep.
The water lines, I don't know if you guys are up on water lines, but you have to pay a fee to pay back the other people that brought the water line back up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's $160,000 for me just to hook onto the water line. But that goes away on April 1st of 2028. So, and then you don't have to pay anything. I remember the town had to pay quite a bit of money to hook on the police station, I believe. So. That's,
Although it's not probably anything that would prevent me from feeling a need to approve this, but as anyone who's traveled that road knows, that although it may very well be posted at 40 miles an hour, I've been driving on that road going 50 and had cars leaving me and cars coming around that corner. And I really worry in the future about the amount of traffic going in and out of that area. And I know that that is all part of the traffic study, and that's beside the point. But I mean, today there was an accident just up the road by Dawson Concrete, and that closed that road for hours. And you take a look at what that can mean. Any accidents in that area around on that corner backs the traffic all the way up in both directions. And I really have a concern about that. I really do. And especially with the potential proposed development on the John Mansville property where they want several hundred units.
John and I were talking about that the other day, and,
Yeah.
and I think in our lifetime, we're going to see a third lane the whole way up that road. The state will come in and do it.
Surprised it hasn't happened yet.
I won't say anything about in the 1960s when I was a little kid driving up from Manchester to go to camp and what that road was like.
I actually understand your sentiment about the speed. So I've happened to be going to the state quite often lately to talk about driveways. And I said, how do you determine what the speed is? I said, I think they should be slowing down. It shouldn't be 45. And he says, oh, we determine by going out and take the average speed of the car. I said, really? I said, don't you think it should be by how much of area gets developed? He goes, well, we take that into consideration. He says there's a lot of politics involved, but the number one reason how they get to come up with speeds is determined by what the average speed of cars are. I was probably as shocked as you ought to hear that, Chuck.
Any further questions for him? Any public comment? Anybody online that we can't see? Everybody good if we close public comment and begin deliberating?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, we'll close public comment and move on.
One of my comments is the study, the wait time, but the state's requiring that, and it's a state road, so they probably know what's best for the road. What did they come up with? John's willing to do that, but we can put a stipulation on it, that he has to get approval, which he's doing.
Sure.
He's going to hook up to the water and sewer. Yeah. Oh, and evidently the two abutters are satisfied at this point, or they would have been here tonight, voicing their opinions.
I have a concern that says that it won't alter the nature of the community, but I think it would substantially alter the nature of the community by putting 40 families into a commercial district without adequate ability for the kids to, without adequate ability for the kids to find recreational uses, I think you're going to have kids playing in 3 and 11 in the swamp or what have you. It's one thing if it's a single family home, but
It could be 40 single family homes.
well, think of 40 single family
But
homes.
you could do that without a variance. So we're not debating whether or not residential homes can go in there. We're debating whether or not the residential homes
It's
are
the multifamily
Right.
that are attached.
right.
That's the nature of the community.
So
Yeah.
there could be kids still playing in there
Right.
with a housing development, a
Correct.
single family housing development. So
But my thought is that it's a substantial change in that community because it's single family now, and what you're looking at is multifamily and a higher concentration, a greater concentration without people to play in a backyard or what have you. That's my concern.
I guess I just see it a little differently because I see that this style of housing fits that district better than a single family housing district would if he built single family homes in there. So I don't quite see it as not fitting the community just for that one reason. If he followed the letter of the ordinance, he could build single family homes in there. And I think that would be less fitting of how that area has developed than multifamily homes would. But that's just my own personal outlook on it.
My one other comment is Tilton needs housing. And this is going to help the housing crunch that we have in this town and most towns in this state. And so I think it's a plus for the town of Tilton to get housing when we can.
I got a couple of things. So in order for, I want to see that we do stick with a cap of 40. Number two, I want to make sure that we have pending, when we get a driveway permit from the state DOT. And number three, I think Attorney Nix brought up the fact that they were going to be working on some drainage reports with a possible retention pond. And I'm going to, I don't know if it should be part of the motion or not, but I certainly would like to make sure that they do a complete drainage study on that property and with a possible retention pond when this is brought to the planning board for their approval. And those are the three things that I am very concerned about. And there is one other one which John will see when the comment comes out. But the culvert thing right now that came to the Conservation Commission last night, we want to see a box culvert put in there for any amphibians that might migrate through that area into the wetlands above. But that didn't need to be part of
that would be all in the drainage planning, right? That would be,
yeah.
Yep. But to continue Jim's concern, is there something we could do? Let's say there are 20 kids that live there. Is there something we could do to say there needs to be a certain amount of grass area or something like that? Because I think it is a valid concern, making sure kids aren't playing on Route 3 or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 40-acre lot, 40-something acre lot.
I feel like maybe it's not like a playground per se, but something along those lines of, okay, there's a dedicated nature area or something.
Certain reserved amount of green space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that would almost pertain to if he were to come back and try to do more housing, but even still, something along those lines.
I just don't understand. I agree. What I'm trying to wrap my head around is how you qualify that.
I suppose what I'm picturing is, okay, there's the 40 units and they're surrounded by woods, and then the kids will naturally gravitate down a driveway or something along those lines, putting themselves in danger. I mean, I know there's an abundance of woods behind there, but something along.
Or they could be in the neighbors, because if the neighbors don't post, as we know in New Hampshire, most of the neighbors don't post. They'll be on the golf course or what have you. They could become a nuisance. But the bigger issue in my mind is that it's not a part of the resort commercial uses that are allowed. It's a much more highly intensive residential use in a much smaller area.
Yeah, I guess I just see residential as residential. So if it's kids living in a single family home or kids living in an apartment, I don't understand how we could. I just don't see it. If they put 30 houses in there and every single one of them had 2 kids living in it and there were 60 kids living in that, we couldn't put any parameters on a single family home development to build a playground.
No, we couldn't. No, we couldn't.
So it would be the same problem. Those kids could migrate into the golf course. Those kids could migrate other places. So I just.
Although there are minimum lot sizes requirements if they were to be individual homes, which would take care of that issue.
Exactly.
For sure, yeah.
I would feel comfortable doing some sort of percentage like that. Like, okay, for every house, there has to be a certain amount of green space or something along those lines.
Matt, what Steve is talking about is in the purview of the planning board.
The purview of the planning board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could pass on like
a note or some
concern of that to the planning board. I don't know if we can attach that to the. Okay. Maybe we could put something in with like a, planning board to consider.
Requiring a certain amount of green space, yeah.
Yeah. The planning board to consider. a certain
What's that?
amount
Oh. Does that kind of help alleviate your concern?
Yes.
I still think that it's something that will forever change that community, that area.
Sure.
Don't you think it's similar to? There's a community behind the pawn shop.
Lockmere Meadows.
Lockmere Meadows. It's a very similar situation to that, where, as far as driving down Route 3, you can't really tell it's there. But
Right, tucked off the road.
Right.
I think this is a similar situation.
That's a really good point. I didn't even really consider that.
And you got one more, if you look up.
So White Rock
as you
too?
get to Lake Winnisquam, where they did the
Profile
clear
drive.
cutting and looking at the area up there behind the hotel.
There's similar multifamily homes in a similar district, but tucked off the road, similar to the way this is.
Okay.
That's a good. I hadn't really considered that. That's a good
I was not familiar with that.
Yeah, behind Fast Cash.
Behind
tucked down in there. There's probably
a
1, 2, 3, probably 6 buildings in there.
I think that's another
Right.
John Bernard property.
There's
49
the-
units.
Yeah.
49.
There's 49 units there.
But there's a more similar type of property where Chuck was pointing out, about down by the lake, that used to be called the Roadhouse Inn. I'm not sure what it is called now, but you can see them right up in there. And those are all duplexes, but they're all put together. Sorry. Those are all put together in larger units, like it's like a 30 of them or 20 of them. And I don't know the total amount that they
They're
have.
condos now.
They're condos?
Mhm.
Okay. I don't think they started off as condos. though.
Nope, they did not.
Right. They get converted.
I think they started out as part of a hotel unit.
That's correct. Lynn Mayer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that answers the question of how you give a parameter to it that isn't just an arbitrary number we're choosing out of the sky.
Yeah.
We have planning make sure that there's
Some sort of
designated green space. I lost your train of thought. Apologize. I don't know. Any other thoughts?
No, I'm all set. Did you open or close public? I don't
We did
remember.
close public comment.
Very good.
Okay, we'll go through the 5 here. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Anyone want to speak to it?
Yeah, I think we need more rental properties in Tilton, and you could easily put up 40 single-family homes there, so it doesn't really change what that property could be used for.
Yeah, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think one of the big keys is that it kind of tucks back the road, and that there's the qualifier of having to go through the state to make sure that the entrance is not conflicting with making a major public mess there, adding the third turn lane, if that's what they find that is needed. If the variance are granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. Speak. I agree with this. I think that the intent, I agree with the the fact that it's serviced by water and sewer. I would feel very differently about this if this didn't have water and sewer hookups. He's actually improving the town by bringing water and sewer further down the road. So I think that kind of maintains the spirit of the ordinance, is that we're not building multifamily homes where they're not serviced by the infrastructure to support them.
I think, and plus, like I heard, it is like a transition lot between two different zones.
Yeah, it is a highly developed area.
Yeah.
It's not a place with no development. Granting the variance to do substantial justice. Thoughts?
I think it's only going to help the area.
Yeah, I think that there's justice. There's not an injustice done to the public by allowing the property to be developed. It's going to be developed either way. It's not even being developed in a use that isn't allowed, in the sense that residential houses are allowed in that area. And I think that it is giving justice to the property owner to develop his property reasonably. That's how I look at it. If the variance are granted, the values of the surrounding property would not be diminished. There's no
I don't think they would be. No.
And the last one, I'd like to have the 2 credits not on there. That's fine. Is hardship. Let me just read the verbiage here. If I can find the right one. Unnecessary hardship. The purpose of this unnecessary hardship means that owing to a special condition of this property that distinguishes from other properties in the area, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. Anyone want to speak to it? I think it kind of all ties back to the other stuff. It's a unique piece of property. It's in a highly developed area. He's not talking about building something that is not even allowed within that use. It's residential. It's more tightly developed residential, but that's actually less of an impact on that piece of property. I think it's a perfectly reasonable use.
Yep.
I see it. Any motions?
Before that, I just have one other question and comment. It is, I did hear during Mr. Nix's presentation that they did not wish to necessarily make these roads up to town specs, but I believe that would be an issue for the planning board. Because normally in areas where there is going to be development, they are required to meet certain specs for the fire department to get in there. And that would be meeting town specs. And so those roads may very well have to meet town specs regardless of it being a private area.
Yeah, I mean, may have that desire, but he might be required to do it for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, you want a motion? I'll make a motion. I move that we grant a variance to permit up to the construction of 10 4-unit dwellings pending approval of a driveway permit from New Hampshire DOT. Now, I'm trying to remember, there was one other caveat.
It was a review from
the drainage study.
Yeah, and to recommend that a full drainage report be prepared for the planning board when it goes to there for a site plan.
Oh, I can't write that fast. And then
something to do.
And then a review from the planning board
on
for designated green space.
Green space.
Is that verbiage right?
Yes, yes. And suggest, right, that the planning board look into requiring some green space be provided in the area.
I'm just going to reread this so everybody make sure I wrote this right. Motion to approve ZB 24-07 to approve up to 4 10-unit dwellings pending approval of a DOT driveway permit. Recommend a full drainage report and a review by planning board for designated green space.
And I would just recommend that on the drainage report it be done for a 100-year storm. That is now the new standard.
Motion's been made.
I'll second the motion.
Made and seconded. Any discussion on it? I think it covers it pretty well.
Yeah.
That's a good call on the 100-year storm. They're becoming the
Mm-hmm.
10-year storms.
Mm.
Okay. If there's no discussion, then we'll move to a vote. A roll call vote for us, Pat?
Roll call vote, Chuck?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
All right. Motion's been passed. Thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you for all your time. Yeah.
We have two things to button up.
Minutes.
The minutes. Somebody please correct me on the one that we need.
We didn't,
James to
we
cut.
didn't approve the minutes
May.
at the last meeting because Jim wasn't here and Steve hadn't been, whatever.
So for May, we need Jim's input.
Now I have to remember what it is that.
You'd send some emails about
Yeah, if you could refresh my memory on the email.
I can probably hunt for it if you need me to.
It might have been about the other, was it the impermeable area?
I think it had to do with permeable surfaces.
Yes, that does sound familiar.
6,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think, let's see. Maybe my email can be found meanwhile.
I'm hunting for it right now.
Could have brought it myself.
Minutes May 21. I recall, so this is your, found your email.
Okay, thank you.
It says, I recall asking something about the lot coverage ratio for ZB 24-6, a special exception. The building is proposed are 12,000 square feet of the 20,000 total. No indication of other impermeable surfaces were indicated. I think their answer was they would present the official total to planning board when the plans were drawn, but that the total impermeable would not exceed what was allowed in the zone. Thanks, James Craftsby.
Okay, I think that that sums it up. My concern was that it was going to be in violation of the zoning ordinance. We were going to be approving something in violation of the zoning ordinance.
Oh, did the minutes reflect what you were hoping for correctly?
No, because it doesn't include that there was a concern that he would be in building this or approving this, that we'd be in violation of our own ordinances. We'd be giving greater impermeable surfaces than would be allowed within the zone. They did not want to grant a variance on that zoning issue.
Okay, how do you want us to change the minutes? Right, that's what we're.
Okay.
You want to change the minutes, but I mean, we could go back
I
and look at.
usually listen to the meeting again, so if you tell me what area
Okay.
it is, and I will re-listen to it and put in the part that you're talking
Right.
about.
Okay.
You can't change the minutes.
Sorry, I didn't
You
mean
can
change the
just-
minutes.
right, okay.
What is what's the specific concern we're trying to address?
Right.
That's what I.
Right, he wants to
Exactly.
make sure that
Yes.
that verbiage that he.
That we don't inadvertently
that
agree to something that changes the underlying zone.
Right.
And now have a precedent.
So you believe you said that in the meeting and it's not reflected in the minutes.
Right.
So.
I just want to make sure that the board was in agreement that you wanted that added, and I'll re-listen to the section and
Oh, yeah,
I'll
yeah,
add it in.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I totally misunderstood what was going on here.
Yeah. So you'll
Apologize.
listen to the minutes and if it's there, you'll adjust. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So we won't approve May's minutes
Yeah.
yet.
But it's on the minute, it's on this minutes now of what the correction should be. So,
Correct. And I hope that you're all in agreement that we don't want to inadvertently.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
change. Okay.
I just didn't understand when we were talking about. I was like, I don't know what he was trying to get us to do, so let's just wait till he comes back.
And I probably should have written it down and then I need to bring notepads with me.
Okay. Any motion for June 18th minutes?
Sure, I'll move we approve them.
I'll second it.
Motion been made and seconded to approve June 18. Any discussion? None?
I wasn't there, so I'll abstain.
Ready to vote? I don't know if you have to. If we roll call vote, can I call
No,
it?
You can call
I
it.
can call it. Okay. It just has to be either a roll call or an all at once.
We never roll call unless you have a very specific going into a non-public. We roll call, but we never roll call anything else.
Okay, I just was in that that weekend planning thing. They were talking about however you vote, you have to vote the same way every meeting, unless the board votes to change how you vote. And then you can't change it for 60 days. Is what they're
We
saying.
normally all say aye, right?
Well, we started doing roll calls at the tail end of Leanne's.
Yeah.
The long and the short of it is we got to pick one way and go with it. Is the way.
Let's do the ayes. That's faster.
Ayes, fine.
I also think there's a difference between a roll call on granting a variance so the public can actually see how each person votes as compared to approval of minutes, which is kind of a
Formality.
Yeah,
Sure.
formality.
I don't personally.
Can we make a motion to do whatever we want?
I'll try to learn better so that I'm more educated on it. Sometimes you learn just enough stuff and you're like, oh no, screw it all up. All right. Those in favor of approving June 18th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstained.
One abstain.
Motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Motion's been made to adjourn. Seconded?
I'll second that.
Those in favor? Vote
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Meeting's adjourned.